Hello, everybody. I see there's a few people entering the chat, so we'll be starting very soon as everybody is in. Thank you for joining us today. So for those of you who just entered the room, I was just saying we'll be starting very soon. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be updating you in a few seconds. Perfect. Welcome, everybody. How's everyone doing? Or I hope everyone's doing well today. Apologies, I'm used to getting the response back. I see some familiar faces in the attendees. Very nice to see you guys here today with us and joining us. And for those of you who are new, welcome to our university series by Fintech Cadence. My name is Leal Al-Hadi. I'm the executive director at the organization. I also have with me Pascal, who leads our community outreach. And I'll be introducing Melissa very soon. But in the meanwhile, I'm just going to give you a quick welcome to everybody here today. So as you guys know, today's topic of conversation is the future of cash, of the cashless society. So we'll be diving deeper into what that really means and some very interesting conversation that's about to happen. And I'm very excited to have Melissa here with us today to be able to delve a little bit deeper into what's going on with payments in Canada, as well as really seeing how COVID-19 has impacted the use for consumers around around cash and payments. Before we get started, though, I do want to thank a lot of the university organizations who have been supporting us throughout this process. Hopefully, some of you guys have heard of these organizations. I won't list them all out individually, as there are many, but we are very grateful for their support and their help during this time with connecting with university students. If you see one of your universities represented here on the page, please feel free to reach out to them. They've been doing some phenomenal work around technology, innovation, finance, and fintech, and they're a great support system for you in different universities. Before we get started as well, I do want to see who is here with us today. So I'm going to do a quick poll, and you guys should be able to see it right now. So if you can just let us know what your background is and where you're based, that will really help us understand who's here with us today and who's joining us and help color our conversation to relevant topics around that. Perfect. Thank you guys for filling it in. We'll just give everybody a quick second. Once you're done voting, you can close the poll on your side, and then I'll be launching the results very soon. Perfect. All right. So here's who we have with us today. We have a few students, so nice to see you, welcome. A few people who are entrepreneurs and working in financial institutions, and those who are working in startups. So very glad to hear about that. It's always good to have different stakeholders from around the ecosystem. And I see a very heavy representation from Quebec, so welcome all of you guys in Quebec. And a few from Ontario, Alberta, and outside of Canada. So welcome, thank you very much for being here with us today, and you'll be able to see the results here on your screen very quickly, just so that you guys see. Perfect. So I'm going to go into a little bit of who we are I'm going to go over the agenda very quickly. So we'll be doing a quick introduction, then we'll be going into the conversation with Melissa. We'll also be doing a segment of Q&A. So I do invite you to start thinking about some questions you'd like us to make sure we address. Feel free to put them either in the chat, which you should be able to see, or in the Q&A section. We do have Pascal who is supporting and looking through the questions, and we'll be able to get to them as soon as we're done our presentation. And then we'll be closing it off shortly after that. So for those of you who are new to Fintech Cadence, I'm happy to introduce you to our organization. Like I said, I do see some familiar faces, so I would thank you to be a bit patient with this. I'm sure you've heard this speech a few times at this moment. But for those of you who don't know who we are a nonprofit organization based in Quebec, in Montreal specifically, but our programs reach across Canada, which is why we're very happy to see a few people from Ontario and Alberta here as well. We're an organization that supports the fintech ecosystem. And what that really means is we're an organization that helps to foster and create more fintech startups, as well as support those who are creating fintech solutions, whether in financial institutions, whether in scale-ups like Multiwave, or whether in academic venues as well. We do three main things. The first thing is educate around fintech. So we try to help everyone understand what are the technologies that are implemented, what is the sector, what's happening in the sector. We do have a fintech certificate that's under that pillar. So for any of you who are interested in learning more about fintech, please look out for our announcement coming shortly regarding a fintech certificate happening in the summer. The second pillar that we focus on is supporting fintech early stage startups. And so if you have an idea and you want to work on it, or if you're still in the early stages and building anything pre-Series A, we have programs that support you. And so you can be in our incubation programs or in an acceleration program. And lastly, and our third pillar is collaboration. We work very closely with financial institutions, whether Desjardins, National Bank, Manulife, et cetera, where we try and understand what are the challenges they're facing or what opportunities they see, and we connect them with either startups that we work with or the talent that we have in our ecosystem. So that's basically who we are and what we do. We have a lot of programs. I would highly encourage you, if you have time, to go onto our website just to give a good look at the programs that we have there. The main program, however, that I want to spend a little bit of time emphasizing and letting you know about is our Formathon. So our Formathon is a 3-week innovation competition where we identify challenges in the sector or challenges for Canadian consumers. And we have a 3-week process where we encourage highly talented individuals to come together and work on solving these challenges or further develop the opportunities that are available there. It's a phenomenal program. This is our 4th year that we'll be doing it. It's all done online, so no matter where you are across Canada, you'll be able to engage. The commitment levels I'll get into in a short while, but I'm also very excited to express the challenges that we've just launched today in the different tracks. So what are the tracks that we have? We have a startup track. So if you're looking to build a business, if you're looking to create a startup, then that's the track that you can participate in. Or if you're looking to deep dive to get a better understanding of what's happening, to be able to build projects and research that other individuals, stakeholders, including yourself, would like to build on, then there is the research track for you as well. As I mentioned, we do have we just announced the challenges today. And so just to let you quickly see what the challenges are. For the startup track, we have 3 challenges. 1, how can we support Canadians in rebuilding their savings? 2, how can we increase security in financial applications? And thirdly, how can we prepare Canadians to catch up and manage their student loans? So those are the 3 challenges that are under the startup track. Remember, the startup track is for those who are looking to create a business. The 2 challenges that we have for the research track is 1, how will the uptake of open banking be impacted by COVID-19? And the second one is, how can we support entities with managing issues and tracking loans? And really here, the focus is around government entities. So these are some really exciting challenges that we have. We're very happy to be able to have launched them. I do want to know, we have another question here for you. I am curious to see if any of these challenges resonate with you. And so I'm going to do another poll for you. And so you'll see here which challenges are you most interested in. And just for your reference, I'll quickly go back up. Excuse me, there you go. Those are the startup challenges. And then I'll give you a second as well for the research challenges. So just let us know which challenge interests you the most. And if you'd like to see any of them, just send them on our chat and I'll bring them back up for you. Perfect. Good. Some interesting ones there. Great. So just a quick look for everybody to know. The two that are really standing out is the challenge number one, which is how can we support Canadians in rebuilding their savings? A very relevant one. So I'm glad to see there are some of you who are interested in that. And the second one is challenge number four, which is how can we support entities with managing, issuing, and tracking loans. Great, I'm very, very glad to hear that. We'll be talking again towards the end about how you can get involved with the Formathon. I will say it's available to anyone. There's no application form. It's really engaging in the ability to be able to connect you with industry so you can validate ideas and research there as well. So glad to see that there is some interest. Lastly, just to iterate, it is taking place on May 28th. The sessions run on Saturdays during the day, so there'll be 3 sessions there, and on Wednesdays during the day, during the evenings as well. And then it will culminate on a demo day on June 17th. So like I said, if you're interested, please sign up on Formathon on our website, fintechcadence.com, and you'll see the Formathon registration there. And we'll also be sharing with you the link today. I'm also very excited to let you know if you are interested in signing up, there's a 30% code today that we'll be sharing so that you can access that as well. All right. If you guys are ready for one last poll before I introduce our guest speaker of the day, we want to know really why you're participating in the session, and so that we can get a good idea in terms of what is happening. So I'll just launch the third poll here, which is why are you participating in the University Series session tonight? So if you can just let us know, and that way we'll have a good idea to how to moderate the conversation as well. So I'll give you guys a few seconds there. And Melissa, just a heads up while they're filling out the poll, we'll be starting as soon as this poll is launched. Great. Perfect, we're getting some great answers here. All right, let me just share the results with you. So we see that a lot of you are interested in learning more about tech and fintech, which is great. Learning about fintech in general, which we're going to definitely try and help you with the vertical of payments and all of the above, which is always good. So thank you very much for participating in these polls. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you Melissa, who is here representing Multiwave. She has extensive experience in this area of payments and in understanding cash as it's being used. I'm very much looking forward to some of these questions. Our preparation call was very interesting, so I can only imagine that this call is going to be equally as interesting. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you, and thank you to everyone. It's great to have such an engaged group, especially given that we're all remote. So this is fantastic.
Perfect. It is our absolute pleasure. And thank you for spending some time with us today as well, and with everyone who's looking to learn a bit more about what's happening in fintech.
Absolutely.
So let's start, Melissa, with the easiest question that I could possibly ask you, which is, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself and the experiences that you have in this area?
Yes, absolutely. So I am currently head up marketing and human resources for Multiwave, which for those of you who don't know who Multiwave is, we're a fintech business based in Montreal by the old port. We are a real sort of innovator and disruptor, I would say, in the fintech space. Our solutions address businesses around the world, and what we have developed are technology and services that enable businesses, whether they are financial institutions such as banks, whether they are SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises or entrepreneurs, or whether they are software vendors, independent software organizations that are looking to have an easy-to-use payment acceptance solution that only involves a device, whether it's a smartphone or a smart tablet. what we found is that businesses are often burdened with having to choose between a variety of different ways to accept payments. Cash is one of them, but businesses also want to accept cards. They also want to accept digital wallets. They don't know whether they should only have online, but they have an offline presence as well. And what we have been working on over the last 9 years at Multiwave is to think, well, the penetration of smart devices in most markets, particularly in North America and in Europe, it is so important and so significant that what if we turned a smart device into a point of sale terminal, essentially allowing you to accept payments. And that's what we've developed today. So essentially a business owner could have their device. They would have an app that we've developed and that they would either use via their bank, which we would be partners with, or we also have a partnership with Samsung for an app that they recently launched in Canada called Samsung POS, Point of Sale. And essentially through that app, it would allow them to accept a payment either by tapping a card to the back of the phone or tapping another device to accept a digital wallet payment. And that's it. It's as simple as that, downloading an app and being able to then accept payments. So that's only one of the really fascinating innovations that you can find in payments. And I've, but previous to working at Multiwave, I was with another payments company in Montreal called PaySafe. They are very prominent in Montreal, but around the world as well. They do a lot in terms of online payment acceptance for a variety of different businesses and different sectors as well. And they also do have point of sale solutions across the US mainly. And so this whole sector is really fascinating, and with today's context, it's an even more relevant one. And there are all businesses today are faced with the prospect of a post-COVID world and how that's going to mean that not only our customers but consumers are going to shift their way of thinking of their behaviors with payment acceptance. So it's an even more exciting and relevant time for us to be in the payments sector today.
Absolutely. They always say in times of crisis, these innovations come out and flourish, right? So it's wonderful to hear that. Thank you very much. So before we deep dive into that, maybe we can discuss a little bit and put everyone in the right context. When we talk about cashless society, what do we really mean?
Yes. Does it really exist today? No. There isn't one country that does not accept cash. There are some countries that are slowly shifting towards less cash use, but cash is still prevalent in most countries, and particularly in North America and in Canada. Cash is one of the main ways that consumers use to pay for goods. So what the cashless society, I mean, we've been shifting towards using cash less often over the last few years. I mean, e-commerce is continuing to grow, and that does obviously it does push some consumers to maybe use cash less or not at all. I certainly I'm in there sort of, I would say the tail end or the beginning, tail end, I would say, of Generation X. And I never have cash on me, ever. So I either pay with my card, or I pay online, or I use a digital wallet. And I think a lot of people, particularly the next generation of consumers, are going to be like that. And so I think we are shifting towards less cash use. What's going to be interesting is that COVID has really probably shifted this trend further, and we're most likely going to see some sort of a shift in thinking, or maybe even an acceleration, certainly in some sectors, of the use of other alternative means of paying, and maybe less use of cash. So we are moving towards there. It'll be interesting to see in the coming months and years is whether that accelerates because of COVID.
Absolutely. And I hope you guys aren't saturated yet. I have a quick poll that I also want to ask in terms of our audience that's here today, how often they would use cash in the past. As you mentioned, it's completely different based on either your age, your user, your comfortability with technology, or just where you are. So you'll see here the poll has been launched. So if you can just let us know how often you do use cash. And in the meanwhile, Melissa, while they're answering that, maybe what we can talk about in overall, although you touched it a little bit, is how has the role of cash changed over time?
Sorry, what the question was, how?
How has the role of cash changed over
Yes.
time?
How has it? Yes. So I think with it has changed with consumer habits changing, and they are usually changed by either a significant launch of a service. What comes to mind is a Canadian business like Shopify that has provided businesses with an alternative and a quick and easy way to have an e-commerce business up and running very quickly and seamlessly. And those types of disruptors really do accelerate the change, or at least they have quite a significant impact on consumer habits. Another trend we're seeing, which is very interesting, is when you introduce an alternative way of paying in the everyday lives of consumers. So transit. The transit sector is a very interesting one that has a significant impact. There are studies been made by some of the largest the schemes such as Mastercard and Visa that have demonstrated that when transit authorities introduce a contactless type of solution, either it's a card or they allow you to pay for your metro trip with a credit card or with an actual transit card, contactless card, this has an impact on the consumer behavior, and you tend to see a larger, more significant penetration of contactless in those cities and in those markets where the transit or another significant daily habit that consumers have. So cash has been impacted by these changes, and we're continuing to see it evolve. And again, COVID is going to be something that will have an impact as well in the coming months and years, as we see those projects come to fruition, perhaps quicker than they were anticipated, and that might actually shift consumer habits even further.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you touched on a lot of really key points. Want to just bring up the results. I shared it a few seconds ago, but just to give you a chance as well, Melissa, to see. So we know before COVID, about 61% of people weren't using cash or not often using cash. So we're seeing that trend has already been happening and kind of growing as well in the time. Now, if I can pause and just ask, before COVID-19, what were the conversations that were happening, and really what was the progression of moving cashless looking like before we're in the current situation?
Yes, well, certainly in Canada, and I'm not surprised to see so many people who weren't using cash very often. I mean, Canada has over 80% of contactless penetration. We're doing great. We're one of the highest in the world so in terms of penetration of contactless cards. So it's not surprising that many consumers today are leaving behind cash and using their cards, or at least using cards, particularly contactless, I would say, more often. So we were seeing that trend already. And e-commerce is of course also very prevalent in Canada. So we were on that trend. There are still sectors that are quite that still accept cash, and where cash is still very common. You can think about the restaurants and the bars and those types of quick service restaurant type sectors. You can think of all of those sectors such as fundraising or faith institutions, or sectors where maybe the alternatives to cash haven't really been explored yet. And so there are still sectors where we might see some growth in alternative payment methods in the coming months.
Absolutely. And you touched on e-commerce. So now we know so I'll bring us to the current times of what's happening now in COVID. And we know that e-commerce is growing quite significantly at a much faster rate than we anticipated. Do you imagine that e-commerce will continually push our movement towards cashless society as well?
Yes, most probably. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but I would imagine it would, because I think that even if, and if I use myself and as an example, and I never have cash on me, but if the COVID has actually changed my consumer habits. I've been buying some of the more sort of basic consumer needs that I have. Either it's basic toiletries, for example, online instead of buying them in the store. Simply because I didn't want to have to go out and go to the store physically. And I do think that that will therefore have an impact. I think we had started to see before COVID a trend in ordering groceries online as well, and many of the larger grocery stores have started to implement those services. They have now accelerated. Certainly, when the rare times I've been to a grocery store, I've seen them being extremely busy, pulling together the orders to deliver to consumers at their doors. So we were on that growing trend. It was very possible that COVID will really accelerate that as well. And I think certainly. Other growing trends like ordering ahead, for example. Many companies, I think some of the great local businesses have, obviously this is an incredibly challenging time for most businesses, I would say, around the world. And some in Montreal, particularly in the small boutiques or restaurants have really looked to find alternatives during this crisis, and maybe even pivoted their business model, and ordering ahead, being able to take orders over the phone, online, so that consumers can either pick up at their stores or even opening up online boutiques. Those we started to see them quite recently because of this crisis. So I think there are, and it'll be interesting to see whether they retain those business models, whether they integrate them as part of a long-term business model strategy for some of those businesses post-COVID. Certainly it will have shifted some of the consumer habits that many people have, and given that the duration that we've had up till now of confinement and social distancing, and we don't know what the future will be, but we might potentially be have to be mindful of social distancing for a number of months still, then those trends will continue to develop, and they will become ingrained as habits. So we might actually really see a shift to these types of alternatives that we perhaps didn't use as much before COVID.
Absolutely. And I think it's, I mean, you've hit on quite a few important points. And if you don't mind, I mean, I think what we're hearing people say, or experts say, whoever you believe those experts is, we're never most likely going to go back to a time before Corona, that it's all, at least not until we have the vaccine. And so a lot of these things that we'll have to adapt with, whether it's right now in the heat of it, or as we accept what's going to be happening as well. So I'm very curious from a perspective of where I stand to see what are the habits that are going to change. The other thing I was going to say is I just want to agree with you there, because I'm actually somebody who would never order online. I would prefer to be there in person. And now my user habits have completely changed. And like you said, I'm buying a lot of the basics as well. So as I'm sure most of our audiences too, or maybe I'm just projecting because I think everyone behaves like I behave, but good to know there. But one element I did want to maybe elaborate a little bit more on is consumer behavior. When we talk about the payments vertical here in fintech, when we talk about cashless, moving from cash to cashless, we often talk about consumer behavior is the biggest element that's going to determine how this goes. And so you touched on it a little bit, but maybe if we can elaborate on what was holding consumers back from moving towards a cashless society? And then now that they don't have that choice, as you just elaborated on, will they still push back, or will there still be that need and necessity for it?
Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the reasons why maybe they were not switching or continue to use cash was just simply out of habit. Some businesses are still paying employees with cash. I mean, most of the tips for a restaurant, for example, cafes, many times they are paid out in cash. Habits change when businesses often have to change their model and their approach as well. So that's where we might see a shift. It'll be interesting to see once we come out of this period and restaurants start to open, and cafes and bars and clubs, and we get to see will they be changing their business model to enable tips to be paid digitally, or via an app such as the ones that we build at Multiwave, whether they're going to have a different approach to that, and to particularly to paying their employees and giving them their tips, or whether consumers are going to do that as well. I don't know whether today, before COVID, we might have left a few dollar bills or coins at a cafe. Will consumers want to do that going forward? Even once the cafe is open, will we have cash in our pockets and leave it on the table? We'll probably think twice about it. So I think that the behaviors are going to change, so it's really those two elements, right? It's the consumers that often inform businesses, but then also the businesses having to think about a new model, and they then push consumers as well to evolve. So it really is going to be an interesting time to see how both of those evolve, and how cash is really impacted. Now, I don't think cash is going to completely disappear. That would probably not happen, not just yet in any case. But I do think that consumers are definitely going to be more mindful of when they're using cash, and how they use it, in which environment they use it. So it'll be interesting to see. I think many people have still, those who did use cash probably still have cash at home right now, probably not using it as much as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that gets changed, and maybe there are some sectors that will continue to see cash being more prevalent. I wonder whether people who still got some cash at home that haven't been using it for a while now are going to think about using it or giving it away to charities, for example, for fundraising initiatives. Perhaps we might see cash continue in those sectors, or not. Only time will tell, really.
Absolutely, and here I'll say I think we, in our prep call, we discussed this, the vulnerable individuals who are in society, those who are dependent on donations, the nonprofit organizations, performers here in Montreal as well. They're heavily dependent on that as we move towards cashless in a consumer sense, are we taking into account that impact that it's going to have? But I put that to the audience because those are great solutions to try and solve. And I'll give a very quick example. 2 years ago, we were working with Desjardins to see if there is an electronic payment system that we can provide to those who are homeless, who might have to be on the street, who are performing, who are dependent on cash. Is there a way that we can support them in migrating to digital solutions as well? So for anyone listening who's really interested in helping vulnerable part of our society, that's really a challenge that I think a lot of us who are in the fintech sphere know is a side impact of us moving towards cashless societies as well.
Absolutely. And Multiwave, we've so that was the fundraising and charities sectors are really areas that we looked into and still look into at Multiwave and try and see whether our solutions are relevant to them. We had a partnership with Centraide, for example, where they used our app to go out on the streets and raise funds, they had a campaign over the holidays where they went to many of the different companies across Montreal and raised funds basically using a device. We also worked with the Centre de la Jeunesse de Montréal, and they had a large event over the holidays. And same thing, they had their teams at the event walking around and collecting funds by card. Simply anyone who was at the event and wanted to donate were able to just tap the card onto the back of the device and they made it a donation. So it's definitely sectors that have there's a wealth of opportunity there, and it is, you've touched on this, I think it touches on financial exclusion and these sectors where they need to adapt, and it's not easy for them, and they need to have solutions that are not costly, that are not time consuming, that are not going to be a burden on their teams, who are volunteers most of the time, they don't have the budgets to be able to have special trainings or to buy complicated point of sale devices and terminals, and having to navigate all of that is very complex for them. So there is a need to simplify the payment acceptance model for those types of sectors. And I think certainly it's something that we've looked into really closely at Multiwave, and we're super excited and really proud to have found something that we think might be a good opportunity. But I do believe that there is a wealth of opportunity there for those sectors, and getting a step closer to bridging that gap of financial exclusion.
Absolutely. I'm happy to hear that. And that maybe there's some people in the audience who would like to know more. So I'll just give a quick heads up. We have 2 more questions, Melissa, and then we'll open it up to the floor. So Pascal has messaged on the chat. If you guys do have any questions, please start writing them on the chat or in the Q&A section. But maybe I'll switch gears here a little bit. And the second to last question that I wanted to ask you was around cybersecurity. So a lot of the concerns, and I think from whether they're businesses who are offering these solutions or consumers who are looking towards that, the concern is around, well, how secure are these payment systems? And how do I, as a consumer, consider that? And how do I, as a provider, take that into account as well?
Yes, absolutely. And security is absolutely critical, particularly in payments. So, I think it's important that as a business and a business owner, you do ask those questions to your providers. Certainly on the development side, where, for example, Multiwave develops these technologies, security is at the front of it's the key element that we think of when we're developing and designing a solution. Certainly the solutions that we have developed take into account security, take into account authentication of the users. There are all sorts of tests that are developed, and there are also standards that we have to adhere to. Companies such as Multiwave and most of the most important payments companies adhere to are what we call PCI compliant, which is compliant with all of the standards from the Payments Council. We have to comply with a number of regulations and standards with regards to security. So, and with regards to protecting data, which is absolutely critical as a payments company. So as a business owner, if you're looking to, if you're thinking about implementing a new solution, whether it's an online e-commerce payment acceptance solution, or whether you are a physical offline business looking to have some form of a point of sale solution, you must absolutely ask all those questions about security, and then really select the business that really has adheres to those standards and also has programs and policies in place to secure the data and to protect your business.
Absolutely. And here again, I'll emphasize or put it out to the audience, if those of you who are looking for ways that you can support some of these ecosystems, we have a challenge in the Formathon, but just in general, cybersecurity is a huge question mark. So thank you, Melissa, for addressing that, because I do think what you're touching on is important. It's the role of both the consumer and the businesses to take accountability on how security is being applied, by asking as a consumer and by providing and being transparent and accountable as a business as well. So I appreciate that. One last question, I see some questions are coming in. So one last question from my side is around the technology. So very big, very large picture, what are some of the technologies we talk about when we discuss cashless society, or just even moving towards cashless?
Yes, so we touched on contactless, obviously. So contactless in all its forms, whether you have an actual physical terminal that allows contactless, or whether you have an app on a device that allows contactless payments. Contactless is one of the technologies and one of the trends that continues to grow around the world. Obviously, e-commerce and payment acceptance online, there are a variety of different forms that this and formats that this can come in. There are, it depends on the type of business that you have. It depends on your requirements. Maybe it depends on also on the business model that you have, whether you want to be able to enable consumers to pay in installments or to pay in one go. What type of payment method you would like to accept as well, whether it's only credit cards, it's debit, whether it's digital wallets. There are a variety of different solutions out there for e-commerce payment acceptance. And you know, then there's just the traditional cards. I think what's interesting, going back to your point earlier about seeing the evolution of trends potentially after post-COVID, although we've got high contactless penetration, the thresholds for paying with contactless was $100 until just recently. They've started to enable higher thresholds, and there are companies looking at different ways to go beyond that. Certainly at Multiwave, we've launched what's called Multiwave Limitless, where we've essentially it's a portfolio of different solutions, technological solutions that enable businesses who are using our solutions to accept contactless card payments on a device or digital wallet with no limit, essentially. So you go beyond the $100 limit, but that is within a secure environment. And so that's going to be quite interesting and important. I know that around the world they started to be more flexible with the thresholds, because it's $100 in Canada or thereabouts. It was up to just recently about £30 in the UK, so much lower. They're starting to increase that, and that will also it will also shift consumer trends as well, and it might actually evolve some of the technologies that we're seeing in the payment sector with regards to being able to accept contactless for much higher transactional volumes and amounts.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for that. It was very extensive, actually, all the different options and opportunities that are there. We do have a few questions to go through, so now I will open it up to the audience. Thank you very much for all of you guys who posted your questions. I'm going to go by order. We have a question from David Rowley, who is asking, what differentiates Multiwave from other similar solutions that are out there at the moment?
Yes, so Multiwave is essentially a solutions provider that that provides technology for smart devices. So we don't provide the technology for a traditional point of sale terminal that you would probably see in a large grocery store. We really provide the solution behind an app that you would have on a device that would allow you to accept payments through a device. And the difference with so we really are actually the only ones really in North America that have actually developed solutions like this, and they are particularly relevant for I would say micro merchants and small businesses, the food truck, for example, or a yoga instructor or a physiotherapist, someone that needs to have an easy, not a very costly solution that allows them to accept card or digital wallet payments without the need to have a bulky point of sale terminal because they're such a small business. And it's also something that might be interesting for a charity and fundraising type of organization, for example, as well. So we are actually quite complementary. We offer our solutions to banks as well, and they can then offer our technology to their business customers. We also offer this to software vendors that also cater to merchants. So a software vendor that maybe has a number of restaurants in that they provide services to, whether it's inventory and restaurant management services, and they can also offer our payment acceptance solution. So it's a complementary service that can be provided to most types of businesses.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, David. I hope that answers your question. Colin, I'm going to go to your question here. And the question, Melissa, is, are there challenges in approaching both B2C and C2C transactions simultaneously?
So the challenges are, to be fair, the challenges that that we face, and they're fun challenges, are that accepting a payment on a device by tapping a card onto the back of a device is something very new. So what we're seeing is that it's an educational challenge of being able to change those habits. Once again, educating merchants on how this type of technology works, how to use it, how to present that payments acceptance solution to the end user. Or their consumer, essentially their customer, who's going to be able to tap their card or tap their phone onto the back of their device. And then obviously it's it's up to the merchants as well to have to educate those consumers. So we're seeing an educational challenge because it's a very new technology, but that's exciting. And we're already live in Canada. We have businesses across Canada using our solutions, and it's very interesting to see the feedback that they're getting from their customers in terms of how they're going about educating them on this new type of solution. So that, I would say, is the challenge, but a fun challenge.
Absolutely. And I know the old adage of, if you have to teach your consumer once how to use a product, that's fine. But if you have to teach them twice, then there's something wrong. So absolutely there around the education. Perfect. Thank you very much, Colin, for your question. Camarena, I'm going to jump to your question. And the question, Melissa, is how do you evaluate QR solutions and e-wallets on those sectors that are less proposed to stop using cash?
That's a great question. So, I think there are a variety of different solutions out there, yeah, and QR digital wallets and e-wallets. I think it depends on. I would say it depends on the provider, and I think it would depend on the type of business that you are as well. I would say, talk with the provider that's offering these types of solutions, understand what sectors they target, make sure that your business is aligned with their core target sectors as well. Oftentimes you'll find that some sectors, some sort of verticals, have a specific type of need. And if payments companies can sometimes be very, very strong in a particular sector and be the experts in that sector. And so if that is a sector that you're in, they have really, they're able to answer all the questions that you have. So I would say, rather than evaluating whether you should be using a QR solution versus another one, I would say evaluate the provider that is offering the solution and check on what types of businesses they're offering their solutions to, and whether they are aligned with the type of business that you have. And that they will be able to inform you on what the best type of payment acceptance solution is for your type of business.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that question. Matthew Farman, I'm going to go to your question. Melissa, the question is, how do you see the impact of a cashless society on instances of fraud? Example, I'm referring to people who currently prefer cash to avoid record keeping and taxes.
Yes. So it's going to be very interesting. I think those businesses today that might be avoiding, for lack of a better word, be avoiding any type of digital or card transactions to focus only on cash, they're probably suffering right now because cash is down. So hopefully it will have changed their approach and their thinking about how to ensure that they can run their business, because most of the times they're doing that because they're concerned that they're not going to have the cash flow, right, to run their business, unless they're a very sort of most companies that would do that. It's really for a cash flow need. So I'm hoping that coming out of COVID, there is a new way of rethinking the approach to cash, to tips, to what types of payment methods you accept tips to be paid in, just so that you don't discount consumers who are actually now shifting their habits. I do think they'll probably have to rethink their approach, and hopefully it will, hopefully do away with some of these past practices of sticking to cash to hide or to protect your business from cash flow needs in a way that we're not supposed to do it, essentially. So we will most probably see a shift, but only time will tell, really.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Matthew. That was a very insightful question. Axel, I'm going to go to your question, and please correct me if I'm misunderstanding the question. It is, can we use these kind of mobile solutions for money transfers or personal usages?
Yes, so it's a great question. So at Multiwave, we actually we develop our solutions for businesses. This is not a peer-to-peer solution. You can't. I wouldn't be able to accept money from you because I owe you $20 for paying me lunch, for example. This is really a B2B solution for businesses, and that's what Multiwave does. There are peer-to-peer solutions out there. Think of Venmo, for example, which is definitely something that's different. And it'll be actually interesting to see how they develop and expand and become more prevalent as well. Certainly they're prevalent in specific, for specific audiences. I think, students oftentimes use those types of solutions. You think about also the people who are maybe sending money back home to their families. It's going to be interesting to see how the consumer to consumer approach to exchanging money develops post-COVID. I think that it'll be as interesting as the B2B side of payments is as well, because there is definitely going to be a need there as well.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to go to Sarah's question. And the question is, geographic regions with widespread internet and tech usages are inevitably, apologies, readier to move to a cashless society. What are potential solutions to support a shift in regions less predisposed? And is Multiwave thinking about this at this time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Multiwave at the moment is really focused on and available in those markets where contactless is already established, and there's a sort of a strong penetration there. However, what we're seeing is, if you think about countries such as Mexico, for example, 80%, I believe, or even more than 80% of businesses in Mexico are actually small businesses, entrepreneurs, these very small businesses that actually help grow the economy. And many of those businesses are going to have to shift towards a different type of way of thinking and way of accepting payments. So and I would say, there are some markets that are that have a variety of different payment acceptance solutions available to them, such as Germany, where cash is still very, very prevalent. It's just simply because of a consumer habit, and they're just not used to, in Germany, they're less used to using credit cards to make payments, even at a grocery store, for example. So I think post-COVID there might be a change. Certainly it depends on the consumers pushing for that change, and it will also be influenced by the businesses and whether they have a shift in the approach that they are taking to accepting payments. And I can think of also, oftentimes it's we talked about transit, but also sometimes just a shift in the telecom landscape in a country. Having more mobile devices available means that some form of mobile payment acceptance becomes available as well. So oftentimes, it's a trend that that informs the consumer habits as well.
Absolutely. And surprising to hear. I wasn't aware of that about Germany. So thank you for that. And thank you, Sarah, for the question. I think we have two last questions. Kamanera, I'm going to go to yours here. And the question is, how are banks and partners such as Visa and Mastercard contributing to the contactless environment in Canada? For example, I think Camarena is from Peru. So here is, in Peru, we got a great marketing campaign from Visa and banks to improve the use of contactless.
Yes, and I think that they are doing a phenomenal job actually of really promoting that. I think first of all, in order for you to be able to accept contactless cards, you have to be able to have cards, right? So it's also the role of the issuing banks, those banks that provide those cards to us, to consumers. If they provide contactless cards, that's a first step. Then afterwards, there's a step of educating, and there are Visa and Mastercard are among the big partners that are sort of leading the charge in promoting contactless. They promote them just in general, or perhaps during large events. As well, you can see an uptick in contactless. I believe there was an uptick in contactless during large sporting events last year. when either Visa or Mastercard were pushing users to actually use contactless. So once there's a shift with banks issuing contactless cards, then oftentimes, yes, you will see large organizations and financial institutes pushing towards contactless. And then you'll also see these payments technology providers and disruptors are coming in and finding even more opportunities and promoting contactless. And if that is combined with a shift in behaviors, with, for example, the transit system being overhauled to accept contactless, then that's when you really see a hockey stick in place with trends and use of contactless. So it's interesting, and it really it speaks to the amazing connectivity between the different players in the payments landscape. You know, the payments landscape is absolutely fascinating. It's complex because there are so many different elements to it, but when it all is moving towards the same sort of purpose of evolving a certain way of accepting payments, for example, it's really fascinating to see that move in the right direction. So yes, it's a great time, interesting time, and certainly very exciting to see what will come in the coming weeks and months.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. And thank you for the question as well. We have two last quick questions that I'm going to ask you, Melissa. The first one is from Himanshu. And the question is, what is Canada's plan to upgrade their real-time payment solution for faster payments and UPI?
Oh, I wouldn't be able to answer that, but it's a great question, and certainly it's going to be important to ask that question to the Payments Canada. Certainly, there's a body of payments experts who are looking into this, and it's certainly we have to move in the right direction and move forward with that respect. So I can't tell you when. It'll certainly be interesting, and I know it's one of the questions that you had in your right, that you've got coming up, is how is COVID going to impact real-time payments and open banking, and only time will tell, but it's going to be definitely interesting to watch that trend evolve.
Absolutely. I know on our side, we're looking very closely at it. And Himanshu, as Melissa mentioned, if you haven't had a chance, I encourage you to look at Payments Canada's website. We're also connected to them and we collaborate with them. So if you would like to be connected with them, please feel free to email me and I'd be happy to connect you. I'm going to send you my email on the chat as well, so that you're able to do so. Melissa, the last question. And I think it's a good question here. So I'm excited to be able to ask it. And it's from Axel. Multiwave is definitely disrupting the payment acceptance. Could Multiwave become our Canadian unicorn?
Oh, well, we would love to, but you know, only time will tell. I think what's really interesting is that Montreal is a hub of fintech disruption and opportunity. I think it's a really, really exciting time to be in Montreal. And although we are in challenging times right now, I feel like the Montreal fintech community is really pulling together. And I'm hoping that what will come out of this will be even more innovation, even more disruption, and, you know, accelerated opportunities for businesses locally or internationally to, you know, recognize Montreal's expertise, but to also leverage the amazing talent that we have in Montreal to develop fintech innovation. I'm super proud to be part of this community. And for I know there are many students listening on this call. It's a very, very exciting time to be looking into the payments or the broader fintech market, particularly in Montreal. We've got a fantastic community here. So I really encourage you to take a good look at the businesses that there are here locally.
Absolutely. Thank you, Melissa. And for those of you who are not in Montreal, this is the time for you to look at your ecosystem as well. And everything has gone remote, so that means more accessibility to all the different companies that Melissa was mentioning. So thank you for that, Melissa. I know we wanted to touch on one last thing before we close for the audience here, is for those who are university students who are looking or for those who are graduated or those in the industry who want to enter any companies around the payments companies, what skills do you think they need to have?
Well, what's great is that you could have pretty much any skill. I entered payments when I was, my background was in marketing and public relations, and a payments company was looking to have my skill set in order to support their go-to-market planning. It's the same with whether you're an accountant. It's the same whether you're somebody at a business school. I think there are a number of different skill sets that can be applied to a payments company. You don't necessarily have to have a payments background. What I would encourage you, though, to do is to learn about the actual payments landscape and the different players and stakeholders that you have in the payments ecosystem, because it's a fairly complex one. And if you want to be able to impress during an interview, you have to somehow navigate and understand the role that company is playing in the actual fintech or payments ecosystem. Other than that, just go for it, because there are a lot of fintech companies here and they all need a variety of skills. So don't be discouraged.
Perfect. That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Melissa. I think leaving on that note, it's going to be very helpful for everyone who is looking to enter that ecosystem. We're always happy at Fintech Cadence to support you. We're always happy to connect you with the different stakeholders. Melissa has been a big supporter of ours and has been very generous to not only spend time with us today, but has done so on multiple occasions. And I think it's indicative of what she was saying earlier about the Fintech ecosystem, specifically here in Montreal, coming together. So it's something that we're very grateful to see and have. So I do appreciate that. And I want to thank you, Melissa, very much for that. Before we close off and end off, to our audience, I just want to quickly let you know, this is one of multiple university series. Some of you, as I said, are familiar and I've seen you in the different ones. These are the upcoming ones that we have. So we have next week, Managing Risk, the new face of insurance, followed by Investor Safe, Financial Freedom with Fintech, Data Ownership, which is a big one right now, especially as Melissa was talking about open banking. And then lastly, closing off with Accelerated Innovation. So if you're registered for this one, you're registered for all of them. Feel free to sign on during the day, same time every week, Thursday at 4 o'clock. We'll have different speakers coming to you to address these different topics. And lastly, before we go, and I thank Melissa, I just want to remind everybody that our formathon is now open. We have the multiple challenges there. And just to make sure you guys are still with me, I'm going to close off with one final poll here. And the question is around your potential interest in participating in the formathon. So I'm going to launch it. If you can just let us know if you are interested. As mentioned earlier, the formathon is a 3-week open innovation competition. I'm happy to sit down with you and hop on a quick call via Zoom or any of the platforms you're most comfortable with to give you more information. Valerie, thank you for asking how you can contact us. We've shared both of our emails. So my email is on the chat as well as the info@fintechcadence.com account. Happy to see if you guys have any questions. As I said, we do have the challenges that are now announced. So make sure you go to our website and you check it out. Please make sure you're also following us in social media so we can announce to you upcoming certificate programs, other programs, etc. Melissa, I want to thank you very much again. It's been an absolute pleasure, as I knew it was going to be from our first call. On behalf of the audience and of Fintech Cadence, thank you for spending the evening with us. And thank you for putting it there and spending time with us as well. I really appreciate that.
Well,
thank you to all.
Thank you very much, and stay safe, everyone.
Absolutely, thank you. And on that note, everybody, I'm going to thank you very much for coming and spending time with us. And we'll be seeing you very soon, hopefully, in our next week session, or if not sooner. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you.